Hi everyone, hope you're all well. The time is coming very soon that BBC Radio 4 on 198 kHz Longwave is going to close. I'm reading now 30th of June, 30th of this month, and it will get shut down. I mean, most of you know my views on that. I mean, I'm completely dismayed at the disintegration of the Longwave band, and I sort of get some of the arguments, not particularly the sort of energy cost argument, because an array of FM transmitters costs a lot more to run than a single Longwave AM transmitter, but the receiving hardware isn't really there anymore, whether it's portables, desktops, car radios, whatever. But after 100 years, we're just over 2 weeks away from the signal from Droitwich, for my region at least. It's going to shut down for good. There's an online petition. There's probably more than one, but I signed one of them. But I felt that I wanted to just do something else personally. So I wrote an email to my Member of Parliament, who is Callum Miller MP, Member of Parliament for Bicester and Woodstock, and he also covers some of the West Oxfordshire region. So I wrote to him and said, basically as a resident of West Oxfordshire, I'm writing to you regarding the imminent closure of BBC Radio 4 on 198 kHz Longwave. And just told him that, as far as I'm concerned, Longwave should be retained because it obviously, it remains a vital lifeline for many, particularly in rural and sort of remote parts of the UK where FM and DAB are not available or unreliable, where the internet is unavailable or unreliable. In some parts of the country it's still non-existent. And I also made the point that for decades the signal on or around 198 kHz has been a sort of constant, resilient broadcaster for essential services. Obviously the shipping forecast, parliamentary proceedings, test match special, and I think listeners relied on its unparalleled reach. I mean, and Longwave and AM in general, is very robust in times of crisis. I told him all of this stuff, during conflicts, power outages, severe weather events, as far as I'm concerned, it's irreplaceable in an era that, where we're increasingly dependent upon sort of fragile digital communication infrastructure. I also said to Callum that, today's world is very volatile, and I believe personally that closing down the only AM broadcast transmission that can be heard across almost the entire British Isles and obviously much further afield into Europe is a mistake, and one in the future that, who knows, could sort of potentially have national security implications. I asked him, so I told him all that, and I asked him, to write back to me because I was interested in hearing his views on, what's happening with BBC Radio 4 and Longwave and how he might be able to apply some pressure in Westminster before it's too late. So I sent him that email on the 14th of April, and he wrote back to me yesterday on the 12th of June. So it took him 2 months to reply to an email. So thank you very much, Callum Miller, for that sort of 2 month delay in replying to me. Clearly, my message wasn't particularly high on your list of priorities. I'm sure he gets, a lot of mail, etc., sent to him, but 2 months, it's just not good enough. But anyway, so he thanked me for writing to him about BBC's plans to stop broadcasting on Longwave. He said he understands my concerns, that as a result of this decision, obviously, as I said, people in sort of rural and remote parts of the country will lose access to Radio 4. He also said that he took my point, that Longwave, is a robust alternative to digital broadcasting. Very good. But what he basically was saying was that this isn't a decision made by Parliament, which we know. It's a decision for the BBC. But he's written to the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport and asked basically what steps the government are taking to make sure that people in remote areas do not lose access to Radio 4. And he's going to let me know when he hears anything. So I don't know whether it's just me, but politicians, I don't know, they're so slippery. They don't really give you an opinion. My point to Callum Miller was, I don't agree that Radio 4 should be shut down. So he's basically just shut me down by saying, well, BBC made that decision. It's got nothing to do with the government, but that's not the point. He's a member of Parliament, and what I want is for him to raise a question at Prime Minister's Question Time about it, for example. And so I got the feeling, having read his message and read between the lines, that he was basically, it felt to me like he's dodging the whole issue, really. He wasn't prepared to say whether he agreed with the closure of BBC Radio 4 on Longwave or not. I don't think he really, he didn't come back to me on my point about it being potentially, having a single AM broadcast that covers the whole of the nation, is a positive in terms of national security. Didn't really come back to me on that, so I don't know whether he agreed with that or not. But in the end, his solution to this is to find out what the BBC are doing to make sure that the people who will be affected by the closure of Radio 4 on 198 kHz, what will be happening to make sure that they can basically access Radio 4 on different platforms. So it's disappointing that it took him nearly 2 months to come back to me, and also disappointing that I kind of feel like he's, not really dealing with my email head on, so, but anyway, I felt like I wanted to do it, to write to my local MP and make my point. I don't think it'll make any difference whatsoever, of course. I'm just one person. I'd be very surprised now if there's another reprieve beyond the 30th of June. You never know, but I think at the moment, this evening, I'm feeling like, basically all hope is lost. So, it'd be a real shame. And in terms of easy listening, there'll be 3 stations left. So you've got Antenna Satellor from Romania on 153 kHz, Medi 1 on 171 kHz, and Algeria Chain 3 on 252 kHz, and then Mongolia, which in this part of the world is barely audible at the best of times. So we're down to basically the last 3 stations on Longwave, which is a real shame. But yeah, I felt a bit better for getting it off my chest with my local MP. But the fact that, as I say, it took him 2 months to come back to me, and he didn't really agree or disagree with the core message, which was, I don't agree that BBC Radio 4 and Longwave should be closing. He said, I understand your arguments, but all I'm really going to do is find out, what BBC are going to do, to make sure that, that listeners can still access BBC Radio 4. So presumably he means DAB, FM, online. I don't know, but presumably that's what he means. So anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I'll be making a recording, I suppose, on the 29th of June. And on the 30th, I'm going to make a recording on the 29th, though, just in case, of Radio 4 closing down, and the same on the 30th. In the meantime, keeping everything crossed, just in case, but as I said, I doubt very much there will be a reprieve, which is a real shame. But, I tried, several thousand others tried with the petition, and in the end it was no good. What a shame that technology that's 100 years old, the technology is about another 20 years older than that, but the fact that we've got essentially the same technology being used, for just over 100 years is quite incredible, really. And I'm glad that I lived a good part of my life being able to listen to Radio 4 on Longwave and the other stations on Longwave. Just a shame now that there are so few, but hopefully they'll carry on for many years to come. Anyway, thank you for mostly listening rather than watching, and 7-3.